The Galactic Council chamber was built to impress, not to welcome. Elias Rowan felt that immediately. The floor curved downward toward the center like a shallow bowl, its surface alive with slow-moving light that adjusted gravity in uneven gradients. It was comfortable for no one human. The air tasted faintly metallic, filtered for a dozen alien biochemistries and barely tolerable for his lungs. Above him, tiers of delegates rose like a living cliff, bodies folded into shapes evolution had never prepared humanity to understand. Rowan walked alone. No honor escort. No ceremonial acknowledgement. Just a narrow path of steady light opening beneath his boots as the chamber's systems recognized his presence and reluctantly accommodated it. He moved at an even pace, spine straight, hands clasped behind his back. Not because he felt brave, but because the dead deserved steadiness. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Curiosity from some species, irritation from others. A few emitted chemical signals sharp enough that Rowan's translator flagged them as contempt. Humanity was new, still raw, still unimportant. A species that had barely earned a chair, and now stood accused of inconveniencing galactic order by surviving. He reached the central platform and stopped. The gravity tugged at him from 3 directions, subtle but persistent, as if the room itself were asking him to kneel. Rowan did not. "Proceed," came the amplified voice from above. High Arbiter Vethrix Kalor occupied the highest dais, encased in a lattice of hovering sigils and authority markers. The Threxian's elongated frame was draped in ceremonial plating that pulsed in slow, authoritative rhythms. His eyes, too many of them, fixed on Rowan with the bored patience of a judge finishing paperwork. "This convocation acknowledges the presence of the Terran representative," Kalor said. "State your designation for the record." Elias inhaled once. "Elias Rowan," he said. "Chief Diplomatic Envoy of the United Terran Assembly." The translator carried his words outward, reshaping sound, light, and pheromone into something each species could understand. Rowan watched their reactions carefully. Most did not change. "You are aware," Kalor continued, "that this council convenes today to finalize post-containment administrative measures regarding your species." Containment. Rowan let the word pass without comment. He had heard it before, spoken over burning skies, over emergency channels choked with static and screams. It always sounded clean when someone else said it. "Yes," Rowan replied. "I am aware." "Then you may submit your petition," Kalor said. Briefly. As if grief respected schedules. Rowan did not activate his datapad. He did not display images or casualty figures. He lifted his head and looked up at the assembled powers of the galaxy, ancient empires balanced on doctrines older than human writing. "Before I do," he said calmly, "I have a question." The chamber stilled. Even the ambient hum of translation fields seemed to thin. Kalor's crest flickered, irritation bleeding through ritual composure. "This forum is not for interrogatives, Envoy." "I understand," Rowan said. His voice did not rise. "This one requires only an answer." A pause stretched. Somewhere high above, a delegate shifted, its mass causing a brief tremor through the floor. Kalor's eyes narrowed. "Speak," the Arbiter said. Rowan let the silence settle, then asked, clearly and without embellishment, "Why did you attack our home?" The words moved through the chamber like a pressure wave. Several delegates stiffened. A few emitted involuntary signals, surprise, discomfort, something close to shame. Others remained perfectly still. Kalor clicked his mandibles once, a sound the translator softened into impatience. "The Terran Cradle world was subjected to a limited containment strike under the preemptive stability doctrine. This has already been documented." "That explains what," Rowan said. "Not why." A low murmur spread again, sharper this time. The Arbiter's posture straightened. "Your species was designated a Category Red civilization," Kalor replied. "Rapid technological escalation. High intraspecies violence. Expansionist potential. Historical precedent necessitated intervention." Rowan nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a weather report. You killed 412 million people, he said. You shattered our orbital infrastructure. You rendered 3 continents uninhabitable. All without warning. These measures prevented far greater loss of life across the galaxy, Kalor said. Your kind was not yet capable of understanding that responsibility. Rowan felt the familiar weight behind his eyes, the memory of cities seen from orbit as lines of fire, of evacuation corridors collapsing under kinetic shock. He did not let it surface. So, he said carefully, you punished us for what you believed we might one day do. The Arbiter's crest flared. We acted to preserve stability. Rowan looked around the chamber. Was any declaration of hostility issued to Earth prior to the strike? No, Kalor said. Was evidence presented to our governing bodies? No. Were we given an opportunity to respond? Kalor's voice hardened. Those steps are not required for preemptive actions. Rowan inclined his head, as if noting a procedural detail. Then allow me to be precise, he said. You attacked a sovereign world. You did so without warning, without provocation, and without consent. And you call this governance. The word echoed strangely in the vast chamber. Kalor leaned forward. You stand here because your species was spared total eradication, he said. Gratitude would be the rational response. Rowan met the Arbiter's gaze. His expression did not change, but something in the room did, a tightening, a collective awareness that this exchange had already drifted beyond expectation. We are grateful, Rowan said quietly. For the clarity. He activated his datapad at last. Light unfolded between them, not images of destruction, but lines of law, council statutes, precedent rulings, classifications. My petition, Rowan continued, is simple. I request that the rationale for Earth's designation be entered into the permanent record. In full. Kalor hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. That information is classified, the Arbiter said. Rowan's voice remained steady. Then classify this session as historic, he replied. Because humanity will be judged by what happens next. Silence fell, heavier than gravity. Somewhere among the delegates, something shifted, not in posture, but in attention. And for the first time since Earth burned, Elias Rowan felt the galaxy begin to listen. The chamber's ambient hum seemed to deepen as the council absorbed Rowan's demand. A few delegates exchanged chemical pulses, translating to a nervous chatter that flickered through their translation devices. Rowan ignored them. He stood still, letting the silence amplify the question, letting the weight of absent voices, the billions who had perished, press against the sterile air. High Arbiter Vethrix Kalor leaned back in his dais, wings folding with deliberate grace. Very well, he said, his voice rippling through the hall. You wish to understand the Council's rationale. Listen carefully, Envo. Humanity was deemed a Category Red species. Its rate of technological progression and adaptive aggression suggested a high probability of conflict within the next 2 standard centuries. The preemptive stability doctrine exists to protect the galaxy from civilizations that, if left unchecked, would inevitably destabilize neighboring systems. Rowan's expression remained unreadable. He tilted his head slightly. A probability. Not a certainty. The distinction is irrelevant, Kalor replied. The doctrine allows action before a threat fully manifests. Your world, despite having made no hostile moves, was assessed as a potential source of catastrophic instability. Rowan's fingers flexed behind his back, the datapad between his hands unused, but ready. And so you judged us, guilty of crimes we had not committed? Kalor's eyes flickered, a subtle tightening that might have been irritation or pride. Guilt is a human concept. We acted in service of order. Rowan inhaled slowly. Order at the cost of 412 million lives. Cities erased, civilizations shattered. That is not order. That is annihilation. The council murmured. Some delegates' signals betrayed unease, but Kalor waved it away. You failed to understand the scale of the galaxy. Left unchecked, Category Red civilizations can ignite wars spanning hundreds of star systems. The measure taken on Earth was minimal, proportionate, and necessary. Rowan let the words hang, letting the room taste their hollowness. Then he asked, quietly but deliberately, "Minimal? Proportionate? Tell me, Arbiter, did you warn our governments? Give them a chance to negotiate? Share your evidence?" "No," Kalor admitted. "Warnings were unnecessary. Evidence was irrelevant. Category Red is not a threat you can negotiate with, it is a variable in the calculation of survival." Rowan's gaze swept the chamber, lingering on species whose forms betrayed ancient wisdom, whose biochemistries allowed for longevity beyond anything human could endure. "So," he said, voice steady, "you executed judgment based on what we might do, not what we have done. You killed us for a probability. You erased our history for a fear." A few delegates stiffened, though none spoke. Rowan did not need them to. He let the moral clarity of his observation echo across the chamber. Kalor's crest flared in what might have been irritation, or instinctive alarm. "Probability is reality for the galaxy," he said. "Unchecked, your kind could have destabilized entire systems. Intervention is not cruelty, it is protection." Rowan's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained measured. "Protection for whom? Certainly not for the lives you ended. Certainly not for the homes you obliterated. Protection for your own sense of control. That is not governance. That is fear masquerading as wisdom." For a moment, the Arbiter's multiple eyes glimmered like sunlight over glass shards. Then he leaned forward, voice sharp. "Envoy, you speak as though your species possesses understanding beyond its years. We are not cruel. We are methodical." Rowan tilted his head. "Methodical destruction is still destruction. And methodical injustice is still injustice." He paused, letting the syllables resonate. "You claim foresight. You claim reason. But where was the wisdom when you destroyed children, grandparents, scientists, farmers, all innocent of any offense? Where was the foresight in turning entire continents into wastelands?" A silence spread, longer this time. Not all the delegates could hide the tension. Rowan's words were no longer rhetorical. They were evidence of an ethical vacuum even among the oldest empires. Kalor straightened, wings fluttering with the restrained fury of centuries. "You mistake caution for cowardice. The galaxy survives because we act decisively. Your species would have acted, unpredictably. That is the calculus." "Unpredictable," Rowan repeated softly. "Or adaptable. You fear what survives because it endures, not because it threatens. You fear us because we continue, even when faced with obliteration." The Arbiter's mandibles clicked sharply, the chamber's vibration carrying the sound unnervingly. "Envoy, you presume much. We acted in accordance with law, procedure, and reason. Humanity is fortunate to remain." Rowan stepped forward a fraction, his hands still clasped behind his back. "Fortunate to remain? Or fortunate only because our survival proves you wrong?" Several delegates shifted in their seats. For the first time, doubt rippled through the ranks. Rowan's calm, precise language was a mirror, forcing them to see the contradiction between doctrine and consequence. "Your records," Rowan continued, gesturing subtly to his data pad, "will show the strike, the casualties, the cities destroyed. But no record exists of the justification in moral terms. That is why I am here. Not to beg for mercy. Not to plead for clemency. But to ensure that this chamber, and every species within it, acknowledges the truth of your actions." Kalor's eyes narrowed, wings tensing. "The Council recognizes the action as necessary. That record exists. Your petition is irrelevant." Rowan's tone shifted, just enough to carry quiet steel. "Then allow me to clarify what is irrelevant. Your perception of necessity does not erase reality. The people who lived and died on Earth, their lives mattered. Their deaths demand explanation, not deflection." Some delegates stirred audibly. One, a delicate species with transparent skin and internal bioluminescence, leaned forward, emitting a light pulse that a translator rendered as curiosity tinged with apprehension. Another, vast and serpentine, flicked a tongue that resonated like a low drumbeat, a signal of interest. Even in alien communication, Rowan sensed the chamber bending under his words. Kalor's voice hardened. You seek to indict, not to petition. That is outside procedure. Rowan's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly. Perhaps. But some questions are larger than procedure. Some truths demand to be recorded, even when inconvenient. I am here to record them. Not to provoke debate, though if debate must follow, I am ready. He let the words settle. The chamber did not stir. Even the ambient hum seemed to hold its breath. Rowan's eyes scanned the delegates once more, and for the first time, he caught a flicker, a hesitation, a recognition of imbalance, of fear wrapped in authority. And then he lowered his gaze slightly, letting the weight of his presence settle over the records, over the tribunal, over the galaxy itself. Humanity had not shouted, had not threatened, had not wielded weapons. Yet through reason alone, through the quiet insistence of truth, Rowan had begun to unsettle the arbiters of power. The chapter ended not with action, but with awareness. In the silence that followed, Rowan knew the first cracks in the Council's certainty had begun to form. And when the archives were finally entered into the record, the first seeds of accountability would take root. It hummed softly as he activated the archival interface, casting a faint glow across the Council chamber. The light traced the outlines of alien faces, illuminating the subtle shifts in posture that betrayed their attention. He did not raise his voice. There was no need. Authority trembles when confronted with precision, and Rowan had been trained to wield logic like a scalpel. High Arbiter, he began. The preemptive stability doctrine governs the intervention against Category Red civilizations. Yet the same doctrine explicitly preserves the Equal Sentience Statute, which requires due process and proportional oversight before action may be taken against any recognized species. Kalor's mandibles clicked in mild irritation. The statute is observed within reason. Category Red is outside the ordinary framework. You know this. I know, Rowan said evenly. But the Council itself has previously enforced the statute even on species classified as Category Red. The Zarvani Republic, the Altari Collective, the Tezhan Conclave, all faced potential preemptive action and yet were allowed formal hearings, evidence review, and the opportunity to appeal. Humanity was denied all of these. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Several delegates leaned forward, flickers of motion translating as intrigue, curiosity, doubt. Rowan let the room breathe in his words. Silence magnified them. Let me be clear, Rowan continued, gesturing toward the holographic projection of Council archives. The air shimmered as files unfolded in layers, each one a record of precedent, decisions, and dissenting opinions from centuries past. Your claim of necessity is inconsistent with precedent. Evidence shows that the Council has historically applied oversight, even to potentially dangerous species. Humanity, by contrast, was subjected to execution without scrutiny. Your actions were illegal under your own code. Kalor stiffened. These comparisons are selective. Not selective, Rowan corrected. Documented. Accessible. Unaltered. He allowed his gaze to sweep across the Council. I have included both supporting and dissenting opinions in this compilation. All have been transmitted to the chamber in full. Some delegates stirred, audible this time. One of the Serpentine Council members emitted a low vibratory hum that a translator rendered as concerned resonance. The Threxian's crest twitched nervously, a signal of authority under pressure. You present this as an indictment, Kalor said, his voice sharp. But you overstate your case. Your species was fortunate. The rationale was sound. Rowan inclined his head slightly. Fortunate to survive, yes. Fortunate that the Council miscalculated human endurance. Fortunate that our cities were not entirely destroyed. But fortune does not constitute legality. Fortune does not satisfy the statute. And it certainly does not absolve the Council of accountability. He tapped a sequence on the datapad, and the light expanded to reveal the full archive of past deliberations. The data included minutes, votes, and even the private notes of arbitrators who had objected to previous preemptive actions. The words carried weight. You see, Rowan said, voice steady, this chamber has always claimed moral authority. You claim reason. Yet your actions against Earth contradict both. You have applied doctrine selectively, invoking necessity where none existed. You have violated your own laws under the guise of foresight. Kalor's wings twitched, his body language betraying agitation that Rowan noted with a quiet satisfaction. You speak boldly, Anvu. But the galaxy is vast. Your species is minor. These records, interpreted as you wish, cannot alter the necessity of what was done. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Necessity does not justify injustice. Let me quote from the minutes of the last Council Tribunal overseeing the Tezhan Conclave. Intervention is permitted only where due process confirms imminent threat. Exceptions must be documented and justified by evidence, reviewed by all participating delegates. Humanity received none of this. And yet you proceed, claiming foresight as immunity. The chamber murmured again. Delegates who had been quiet now whispered among themselves. Rowan let it happen. Doubt, once seated, grows without effort. Kalor's tone hardened. You presume to lecture the arbiter of the council. Your species has neither the longevity nor the experience to challenge this institution. Rowan's voice remained low but firm. I do not lecture, High Arbiter. I demonstrate. The documents speak for themselves. The precedent is clear. Your interpretation is flawed. Your actions illegal. And these facts are now entered into the public record. At that, the chamber's translation fields expanded outward, transmitting the archive simultaneously to every council outpost, every diplomatic station, and every species capable of receiving the data. A ripple of comprehension passed through the observers, subtle but undeniable. One of the older delegates, the bioluminescent being, pulsed softly, a signal interpreted as shock at discrepancy. Another, serpentine and massive, lowered part of its body, a gesture interpreted as submission to incontrovertible logic. Even Kalor's multiple eyes flicked over the data, scanning rapidly. The arbiter's composure faltered, however subtly. Rowan took a single step forward. You may call it intervention. You may call it foresight. But the archives reveal what it truly was: selective enforcement, applied without oversight, executed on a species incapable of defending itself according to your own statutes. This chamber may choose to deny it, but the galaxy has now seen the record. The truth is undeniable. Kalor's mandibles clicked sharply. You overreach, Anvo. The Council decides what is necessary for stability, not what is morally convenient. Your species survives by fluke, not right. Then let us speak plainly, Rowan said. You feared us not for what we have done, but for what we could do. You feared human adaptability, persistence, endurance. You feared survival itself. And fear, High Arbiter, is not law. It is weakness. The first cracks in authority were no longer metaphorical. Several delegates shifted, the faintest signs of dissent spreading. They had followed Kalor's lead for centuries, unquestioned. Yet here, through methodical exposition and undeniable records, the Council's moral certainty had begun to fracture. Kalor's voice rose, sharper now, almost a hiss. Anvu, you risk retribution. Your species is still under observation. Rowan did not flinch. Repercussion is irrelevant. Accountability is eternal. Your doctrine may have allowed preemptive strikes, but it did not grant immunity. The archives prove it. The record is public. And the galaxy will remember it. For a moment, the chamber was silent, save for the low hum of the translational fields and the faint vibrations of alien respiration. Then, a subtle movement spread, a ripple among delegates that Rowan had learned to read over decades of negotiation. Interest, doubt, even fear, the Council's carefully curated image of infallibility had been punctured. Rowan's gaze remained steady on Kalor. High Arbiter, your doctrine has failed. Not because of weapons. Not because of diplomacy. But because truth cannot be suppressed. History has begun to write itself, and you will appear as it should record you, flawed, selective, fearful. Kalor's crest flared in the faintest acknowledgement of unease. Rowan allowed himself a slow, deliberate step back, returning to his original position. The chamber was quieter than it had ever been. Delegates who had leaned back in confidence now leaned forward in thought, their senses attuned to the subtle vibrations of the room. Elias Rowan observed, steady as ever, letting the silence stretch long enough to make even the High Arbiter uncomfortable. It was not loudness that demanded attention, it was presence, clarity, and unflinching truth. Kalor's multiple eyes flickered in patterns Rowan had learned to read, irritation giving way to uncertainty. The Threxian's voice, usually smooth with authority, carried a trace of tension. "Anver," he said, "your presentation has been thorough. Yet I caution you, the Council exists to enforce stability, not to revisit actions already executed." Rowan tilted his head slightly, letting the weight of what he had revealed sink in. "High Arbiter, the Council does not exist above law. It exists within it. And the law has now been shown to be broken." He gestured to the archival display, where precedent and internal records continued to unfold. "Do not mistake silence or procedural inertia for approval. This chamber now holds proof that doctrine was applied selectively. That humanity received no due process. That the statute meant to protect all sentient beings was disregarded in favor of fear." A ripple passed through the chamber. Delegates whispered to each other, subtle vibrations and chemical pulses that Rowan's translator rendered as concern, surprise, uncertainty. Some looked at Kalor as if asking silently, "Was it true?" Kalor's mandibles clicked sharply. "Anvu, your audacity is notable. But what remedy do you propose? Humanity is fortunate to remain. Do you seek reparations? Retaliation? Vengeance?" Rowan's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in unwavering focus. "No," he said. "Fortune is not justice. Retribution is not our goal. We seek only acknowledgement, accountability, protection against the recurrence of what has been done to us and others who may be similarly judged in the future." He let the words settle. The chamber's ambient light seemed to dim in recognition, the translation fields vibrating subtly. Delegates turned to each other, uncertainty spreading like a current. Rowan's calm insistence contrasted with centuries of tradition, and the Council could feel its own authority shifting under the weight of exposed contradiction. One delegate, a species with translucent skin and pulsating organs, leaned forward. The translator interpreted the signals as precautionary endorsement. Another, serpentine and massive, coiled slightly lower, signaling consideration of compliance. Even Kalor's wings twitched nervously. "You propose that the Council accept wrongdoing," Kalor said finally, his voice tight. "And yet to admit it would undermine the doctrine itself. Without it, we lose stability." Rowan's tone remained level, a quiet steel beneath the words. "Stability based on selective enforcement is not stability. It is fear masquerading as authority. True stability arises from law applied evenly, from fairness acknowledged, from accountability that deters future injustice. You will not maintain order by pretending your actions were lawful when they were not. The galaxy sees the record. The doctrine has been exposed. What survives now must be corrected." Kalor's multiple eyes darted to the delegates. Whispers and signals of debate grew. Some leaned toward enforcement of old laws, others toward consideration of Rowan's position. The Arbiter realized that any attempt to silence the argument would appear both arbitrary and unjust. The chamber's foundation, their authority, was no longer unassailable. Rowan stepped slightly forward, hands still clasped behind his back. "I am here as a representative of humanity. We do not demand vengeance. We do not seek domination. But the record must reflect the truth. You acted preemptively. You acted without consent. You acted selectively. And the statute was violated. That acknowledgement is the minimum required to prevent this from ever happening again." Kalor's crest flared, signaling suppressed anger. "And if the Council refuses?" he asked. "Then the galaxy will judge you," Rowan said quietly. "Not through threats, not through weapons, but through record, through precedent, through the awareness of every species that receives this session." The choice before you is not between strength and weakness, it is between truth and concealment. A long silence followed. The translation fields reflected subtle tremors, not of physical disruption, but of moral and procedural unease. The delegates had never faced an argument so meticulous, so unassailable, so devoid of emotion yet full of consequence. Finally, a delegate rose, slender and glass-skinned, organs pulsing in soft rhythm. "If the records are accurate," it said, voice clear and deliberate, "then the actions taken against Earth were outside procedural mandate. The doctrine cannot override the statute." Another nodded, a serpentine figure with iridescent scales. "If precedent is violated," it hissed, "the doctrine cannot hold. Humanity's case is sound." Kalor's multiple eyes flicked in rapid patterns, his voice growing tight. "Anvo Rowan, you have manipulated the archives to present this as an indictment." "Not manipulated," Rowan said evenly. "Documented. Accessible. Unaltered." The chamber shifted. The momentum of centuries of unchallenged authority wavered. Kalor's voice, once resonant with unshakable command, faltered. "And yet, we acted with the intent of preservation. We prevented harm that may have occurred." Rowan tilted his head slightly, calmly precise. "Intent does not erase action. Preservation claimed after destruction is not law. It is fear masquerading as foresight. The archives show it. The galaxy now sees it. The Council can choose to accept that truth, or it can watch its authority collapse in silence." The murmurs grew louder. Delegates who had long deferred to Kalor's voice now debated quietly among themselves. A few raised objections, but the tide had turned. The balance of the chamber had shifted irreversibly. Kalor exhaled, mandibles clicking in rapid succession. "Very well, Anva. Humanity's claims are acknowledged. The preemptive stability doctrine will be suspended until review. The Council recognizes procedural failure. The records will reflect as much." Rowan nodded slightly. "Acknowledgement is the first step. Oversight, transparency, and protection for all species will follow. That is justice. That is accountability. And that is what ensures stability that endures without fear." The chamber remained tense, but the pressure had shifted. Humanity's position was recognized. The doctrine could no longer operate unchecked. And Rowan, standing calm and unwavering, knew the most important victory had already been secured, not through force, not through intimidation, but through truth, law, and the quiet insistence of survival. Kalor's crest twitched one final time, a gesture that might have been respect, or resignation. Rowan did not smile. He did not need to. He had spoken, and the galaxy had listened. Humanity had not wielded weapons. It had wielded reason. As he stepped back from the podium, the chamber's energy shifted palpably. Delegates whispered, signals of reflection pulsed, and the record was sealed. Rowan did not linger. He walked toward the exit with measured steps, each one carrying the weight of billions, each one echoing quiet pride. Outside, the stars glimmered across the Helier core. Humanity had survived, not by conquest, not by power, but by clarity, persistence, and the